Charles, it's so great to connect today. You have been impacting my life for a while now. So in COVID hits around 2020, I was playing basketball every day, and then I could no longer play basketball. So I'm trying to figure out how am I going to exercise, and so I think, well, I'll go running. Well, I hate running, and I could never ever run for more than 5 minutes without getting so bored. But I'm thinking, cue routine reward from Power of Habit. So I start setting my shoes out the night before. I try to, get rid of any possible burden. I wake up in the morning, I see the shoes, I start running, but then I'm thinking like, what's my reward? And is it like a protein shake after? I don't know. That wasn't doing it for me. Well, then I started pairing podcasts, audiobooks with the run. Again, this isn't, it's not like rocket science, but just that simple shift of creating the reward became like, oh, this is a time where I
Yeah.
just get to listen to like great books or great podcasts. And so by adopting your framework, I felt like that has completely changed my life because now I'm getting to the point where I can't even play basketball and I run basically every day now. So it's great
Yeah.
to connect and thank you for the work you do.
No, thanks for having me on. And by the way, I do something similar. So I often run if I run outside, I listen to podcasts, and it's like my reward is to listen to
Yeah.
podcasts. If I run inside, we have a Peloton treadmill, and I can play Netflix on it, and I watch Suits, which is like the
Yep.
worst, cheesiest TV show on the face of the planet.
I've seen it.
And like I would never watch it like just sitting on the couch, but when I'm running, I'm like, oh, this is amazing. So it's yeah, it works. It works. If you give yourself a reward, it makes an activity much easier.
Yeah, it's so great. And again, so simple, but that's the thing for this podcast is simple, practical, and underappreciated. So, Charles, as you think back on the books you've written and the lessons you've learned, are there one or two lessons that you would most want to pass on to others?
Well, so my most recent book, Supercommunicators, that came out earlier this year, is about why some people are so much better at communication and connection, and kind of what's the science behind that, right? How do we connect with other people? Then there's stories about like CIA officers recruiting overseas assets, and the Big Bang Theory, that television show, like why
Mhm.
it became popular and how NASA finds astronaut candidates who are emotionally intelligent. But the thing that like I think was most impactful for me, and the thing that I try and pass on to, for instance, my kids, is the power of asking questions. That that people who know and are comfortable and are in the habit of asking questions, they kind of have a superpower in life. And part of that is just practicing it, but part of it is also recognizing that some questions matter more than others. And within psychology, they refer to these as deep questions. And a deep question is something that asks about your values or your beliefs or your experiences. And that can sound a little bit intimidating, right? So like, but it's actually as simple as if you meet someone and you say, what do you do for a living? And they say, I'm a doctor. Instead of saying, oh, where do you practice medicine? Asking them, oh, what made you decide to go to medical school? Or like, do you like being a doctor? Like, what do you like about it? Right? Those moments when we ask not about the facts of someone's life, but how they feel about their life, those are moments when they oftentimes say something real and revealing and meaningful, and we have a chance to reciprocate at that point and have a real conversation. And so the number one piece of advice that I think I try and teach my kids, we actually have a game called Questions in the Car where they have to ask me questions. um the number one thing I try and teach my kids is the first couple, like if you're not in the habit of asking questions, it can feel awkward. But if you just practice it a little bit, suddenly you're like a question master, and you can ask these questions that lead to really important conversations.
When I was in high school, I had a best friend named Logan, and he was amazing at speaking to adults. And I just remember as a high school kid, like, how does he do that? How does he speak to it? Like, I have a hard time like opening up and like, how does he carry on a conversation with adults? And then I read a book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, and there was a chapter in there about asking people questions. And then I started watching him and thinking back, it was like, oh, he was just asking questions. Like that was
Yeah.
basically all he was doing to talk with adults was asking questions. And then, so I love this idea of, okay, it's not just like, so it's fine to ask questions, that's good, but some questions are better than others. So,
Yeah.
how did you get turned on to this idea of the deep question as opposed to, where do you work?
Well, so there's a guy named Nick Epley who's a professor of psychology at the University of
I
Chicago.
will say former guest of the show as well, but he did
Oh
not talk
yeah,
about
yeah.
this. So,
No, Nick's fantastic. And Nick has studied deep questions his whole life. And he does this thing where he'll get on a bus and he'll set a goal for himself of talking to a stranger and getting them to talk about their hopes and dreams within 3 questions. And when he told me that, I was like, oh my God, that sounds impossible. And he was like, yeah, usually it all actually only takes 2 questions,
wow.
right? Because I like sit down next to someone, I'm like, oh, what do you do for a living? And they're like, oh, I'm an accountant. And Nick asks, oh, did you always want to be an accountant? Like, was that your dream as a kid? And the person says, no, of course not. What kid wants to be an accountant like that? I wanted to be an astronaut, right? So I think that the thing is that from talking to Nick and talking to others, but there's been a bunch of experiments that shows that we often hesitate to ask deep questions because we think that the other person will see it as intrusive or as overly personal or it'll just be weird. But actually, when we ask a deep question, the other person loves answering that question. And the conversation goes much better than we expected. There's actually, so I give a lot of speeches about super communicators. And I do this thing with the audience. And we've done this up to like audiences as big as 7,000 or 10,000 people, where I'll say, like, okay, look, here's what we're going to do. I want you to turn to the person next to you who's presumably a stranger. And I want you to ask and answer one question. And that question is, when is the last time you cried in front of another person? And then I'll say, like, how many of you are excited about this? How many of you think it's a great idea? And nobody raises their hand, right? They all think this is a terrible, terrible idea. They did not come to a conference to have a conversation about when they last cried. And then we do the experiment. And then afterwards, I ask them how it went. And people love it. They loved those conversations. They always say things like, I felt so much more connected to this other person. We had this thing in common that I didn't realize we had in common. And we never would have figured it out otherwise. There is a sense of closeness, a sense of connection that comes from engaging in reciprocal authenticity. And when we ask deep questions, we make reciprocal authenticity easier. And that's really, really powerful.
wow, talk about underappreciated because people predict they're not going to like it. And then not only do they like it, they absolutely love it.
Yeah.
It reminds me of John Gottman's research, the marriage and family researcher. He's pitching a book to an agent and pitching this research and it was either the agent or one of the marketing execs is like, tell me one thing that I can do to improve my marriage, like the one most important thing. And he says, are you helping your spouse fulfill their hopes and dreams? And so it's kind of this idea that Nick is at, right? Like what matters most to people? Can we get at it quickly? And what a cool way to do it. Oh, did you always want to be
Yeah.
an accountant?
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's a really powerful. So that is definitely a lesson that I would try and teach others is get in the habit of asking questions.
Okay, so last question. Speaking of questions, when you're playing this game with your kids, I'm curious, what are the rules and how do you encourage them? And are you teaching them?
Um,
Like, how does this go?
no, it's so my older son, I have no problem with him. My younger son hates this game. He absolutely despises this game. So we have one rule, which is we'll take turns back and forth. I'm gonna ask him a question, and then he's gonna ask me a question. And the only rule is that he can't ask me the same question I just asked him. Right? And it should be something he's actually curious about. It should be something he actually wants to know, as opposed to my dad is making me do this dumb thing in the car. Can I humor him? But beyond that, that's pretty much it. And like sometimes the questions are not, I mean, my questions are not great and his questions are not great. It's like, what'd you have for breakfast? What's your favorite breakfast? But sometimes the questions are really meaningful, right? Like, how did you decide to marry mom? Like,
Yeah.
why did you decide to become a journalist? And so, and the point of the game is to just get into a habit where asking questions is really easy. It feels very natural. And it's easy to do that.
Well, again, it reminds me of my friend. Such a simple technique he was using to speak with adults was asking questions. And so I love this game. It's a very practical way to help kids potentially have a big impact on their life, be able to talk to other people and carry on conversation.
Yeah.
Uh, you
We
know,
we do play this other game that's even less popular, which is that sometimes we go to a restaurant and we'll order our food and I'll tell them that they have to walk around the restaurant and they have to like learn 2 things about strangers in the restaurant and then they can't eat until they come back with 2 interesting facts. I will say my wife hates this plan. Like she does not like this game at all. And the boys hate this game. But again, it's actually like the goal of it is to get them in the habit, get them practice at talking to strangers. Because if
Yeah.
you can talk to strangers, it's a huge advantage in life. And like it's very natural to be like, I don't want to go talk to that person. I don't like I don't know how to start a conversation with them. But if you practice it, you get good at it.
Well, and something that you said recently is that basically just thinking a little bit deeper about communicating. I mean, that's one of the main ideas of the book, right? Just a little bit of effort
Yeah.
can go a long way.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely right. So one of the things about super communicators, and we're all super communicators at one time or another, right? When we talk to our best friend and we know how to cheer them up, or when we go into a meeting and we know exactly what to say, we are being a super communicator. The difference is that there are some people who can do this consistently. They can do this with almost anyone. And part of it is that they just recognize that the skills that we use with our friends, the skills of asking deep questions, of proving that we're listening, of trying to sort of match what kind of conversation they're having, those are skills that you can use with anyone. They're skills that once we recognize them as skills, they kind of become fungible. But then I think the second part of it is that there is this thing that super communicators do that, again, we do with our best friends when we're talking to them, which is that we show them that we want to connect. We
Yeah.
show them that we want to make a connection with them. We actually think about our conversations before and afterwards, right? Like we like reflect back and they're like, oh, John said this thing and I said this in response and I probably could have put that better or I could have been more encouraging to him. Like super communicators, they do not have any special powers, right? And it's not that they're extroverts or that they're charming. In fact, literally anyone can become a super communicator. It's just a matter of learning a couple of skills. But one of those skills is to want to connect with other people and to show them that you want to connect with them.
Interesting. Well, I know I said that was my last question, but I've got one more. Did you
Okay.
always want to write a book on super communicators?
No, no, not really. I mean, all of my books sort of, I've written 3 books now and they all come from the same place, which is basically I have a problem in my life and I want to solve that problem. And if I call experts and ask them to solve my problem, they won't talk to me. But if I call experts and say, I'm writing a book and I want them to solve my problem, then they'll talk to
Yeah.
me. And so in this case, like I got into this pattern with my wife where I'd come home from work and we just kept on, and this is something I think happens in every relationship. Like I'd come home and start complaining about my day and she would give me some advice, like, why don't you take your boss out to lunch and get to know each other a little bit better? And instead of being able to hear her advice, I'd get even more upset. And I would say, like, you should be supporting me and you should be on my side. And she would get upset because I was attacking her for giving me good advice. And so basically, I went to experts and I asked them, like, what's going on here? Like, why do I keep falling into this trap? And they said, well, actually, like, we'll tell you exactly what's going on, which is that you and most people think that a discussion is about one thing. You're talking about your day or you're talking about your kids. But actually, every discussion is made up of different kinds of conversations. And in general, those conversations tend to fall into like one of 3 buckets. There's, practical conversations where we're solving problems or making plans. And then there's emotional conversations where I might describe what I'm feeling. And I don't want you to solve my feelings. I want you to empathize. And then social conversations, which is about how we relate to each other. And what they said is the problem here is that you're coming home and you're having an emotional conversation and your wife is responding with a practical conversation. And both of those conversations are totally legitimate and fine. But if you're not having the same kind of conversation at the same moment, you're not going to be able to connect with each other. And so they said, here's a way to do this. And so for me, that was really eye-opening that like what seemed like a hard problem to me was actually just solved by learning some of what science has told us. And so that's why I wrote this book.
What a very simple insight that is actually quite profound. Well, as you know, a podcast host, I'm asking questions, so I appreciate that you and Nick Epley have given me another question to, like a fallback question or maybe a leading question. Did you always want to write a book on X? And
That's right. It's a
got
good question.
got some
And,
great
and then
insight.
from there, you can say, like, and by the way, when is the last time you cried in front of another person?
That will be I'm gonna leave that in the
It's
next one.
setting matters a little bit in that question.
Well, Charles, this is so great. I really appreciate you sharing your time and lessons with me. Like I said, I love cue, routine, reward. And now I don't know if my kids are going to like this, but we've got some new games to look
I
forward
love
to.
it.
So thanks so much
I
for coming
love
on,
it. I hope it
Charles.
goes well. Thanks so much. Thanks for having me.